again, friends, and welcome back to my channel. My name's Amy, and I'm glad you decided to join me for this very book-related video. Today I'm going to be reading chapter 67 of the book that I wrote called Legends, Orbs of the Elements. Today, being Tuesday, I am going to be making another video, which I will be posting today, which is my very first Tattoo Tuesday, and this series I will be discussing and talking to you guys about the tattoos that I have, starting with the first one, which is my jaguar tattoo. So stay tuned for that if you are interested. I'm so excited to talk to you guys about it and start the series. But you guys are not here for that. So without further ado, let's just jump right back into this adventure. And as always, if you are interested in wanting a copy for yourself of the book that I wrote, I will be leaving all that information at the end of the video. So stay tuned for that. Chapter 67. The last of the Lygons was putting up a hell of a fight. Death was all around. Dead bodies from both foe and friend were scattered as far as the eye could see. Riplin was still a beast. He was about to head in a different direction when the Hall Lygon had the dragon creature lunge at him and topple him with his enormous weight. Riplin bit and kicked with all his strength. Then the Lygon began biting him. The creature's breath was foul-smelling from the raw flesh of their allies. Drool and spit and blood coated his face as they fought each other. Riplin received several bites from his attacker, and there were chunks of his monster's flesh removed. Miggltura and Leon ran to their friend's aid. Little Boy had survived in the midst of battle. The adult water dweller spied his master and headed straight for him. He wasted no time while opening his massive mouth on the Lygon's paw and chomped it down. The sound of snapping bones made an eerie sound. Now the Lygon was distracted by the sudden pain. This gave enough time for Miggltura and Leon to rescue Riplin. However, the damage had been done. Little Boy did not unhinge his grip from the Lygon, who was 3 times the size he was. Blood ran down Little Boy's mouth as he began to shake his head from side to side. The Lygon snapped and breathed fire, but Little Boy was intelligent and began rapidly turning in a move called a death roll. The Lygon used his massive paw as Little Boy was within inches of the long claws that dripped red from the blood it spilled. Little Boy released his vice-like grip. This sudden release of force caused the Lygon to lose its balance and collapse on the ground. There was a group of elves astride their mighty elk, raised their javelins and slew the evil creature once and for all. Leon managed to locate Jacob in the midst of the melee. The legend had several cuts and gashes, but none appeared to be life-threatening. Jacob was a very skilled fighter. He didn't waste energy or movement when he fought. It was almost like a dance-like rhythm that he fought. Then Leon noticed that Jacob was forced on a figure walking a few yards away. Leon followed with his eyes. It was no other than the prince himself. In his arms, he was carrying a body. Leon gasped. He knew he needed to be fighting, but why was Nero coming to them? Then he felt sick because his question was soon answered. He was carrying Castilia. Her arms dangled limply as the prince drew near. Nero raised her lifeless, bloody body Nero raised her lifeless, bloody, bruised body high in the air. The world seemed to be still. Victory is mine! See, I have killed the one foretold to kill me. I am your king! Jacob spun to gaze at Leon. Leon, hunter of the orbs, I need you to trust me. Cover me with your bow. Leon obeyed. The elves on their elk fanned out to give the other two more protection. The flyers also swooped nearby. At that moment, he witnessed something he would never forget. True heroism. Jacob sheathed his weapon and charged headlong directly at Nero. He screamed out a battle cry. They collided with a powerful thud and tumbled to the hard, uneven, unforgiving ground. Castilia's unmoving body rolled a safe distance away. Nero immediately began to summon black magic to attack Jacob. The prince was halted because the spirits Trigger had asked to help, gathered hand in hand to form a protective ring around Jacob. The prince now had a glowing hexagon floating in his palm and threw it in Jacob's direction. Jacob put up his hands to protect himself when one of the spirits easily caught it and threw it back at Nero, who had to use his own magic to turn it into a harmless bubble. Jacob made a beeline for his sister. He knelt by her side and placed his dirty, bloody hands on his sister's forehead while repeating these words. For you I sacrifice my life. Then Jacob felt all the pain that was Castilia's growing more and more intense. A mysterious lightish red mist began manifesting while glowing around them, and Nero now began blasting in rapid succession different shapes of green to purplish light directly at them. But the spirits held their ground and held up their hands. Each time they did, it would turn into a plane, or it would turn into a plant or some harmless flower or raindrops. All Jacob could remember before passing out was Nero yelling out, "No!" The world fell away. Castilia batted her eyes. She was floating in the heavens of the afterlife. There she saw many of the legends that had perished in the sanctuary attack. They talked to her. Starlin came up to her. She smiled and embraced him. Then he led her to where two familiar figures were waiting for her. Father and mother greeted her with open arms. Oh, the complete happiness she felt. She hadn't felt this at peace for a long time. Her father twirled her around like one does when dancing. Her mother peppered her with kisses. They looked just as pleased to see her as she was to see them. After a short time, her father pointed out to the earth down below. Castilia, my sweet, I love you, and it fills my heart to hold you again. But you cannot come with us, but you cannot be with us yet. Castilia didn't understand. The legend's mother put a comforting arm around her daughter's shoulder. This felt warm and secure. I have to agree with your father on this, my love. Your brother is right now sacrificing one of his lives for you. Now he will only have 2 lives left. Castilia closed her eyes in frustration and opened them. No! Why did he do that? She asked angrily. The father and mother both gazed lovingly at each other before they answered. Because he loves you. Now be a brave girl. We will always be watching over you and your brother. Castilia hugged her parents in turn. I love you, Papa. He raised an eyebrow. She hadn't called him that since she was learning how to talk. He held her face in his hands. I know. Then she felt herself flying past millions of stars and galaxies. Then she was falling, 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 until her eyes fluttered open. She was assaulted by the noises of battle once more. Her eyes searched for her brother. She crawled towards him and checked his pulse. Yes, he was still alive. Her purpose was clear. She gently kissed him on the forehead and whispered her thanks in his ear. She rose to her feet, tears flowing down her face. Oakland was back in his human form. He trotted up next to her and handed her a weapon. Nero stood shocked. He had never been afraid or even intimidated by anything until now. This legend wanted his blood. He tried to get out of her way, but she came right at him. She spoke directly at him, and a chill coursed down his back. The words were as hard and as cold as steel. You will die, but before you do, I want you to reverse the curse on the beasts upon the brave people who dwell in the swamp. Do it now. Nero tried to think of a strategic way to avoid this. Reverse it, I say, she demanded, and brought down her sword to his neck. Nero took a deep breath. But before he could finish, she swiped her blade across his legs. He shrieked in pain and now was kneeling on the ground. I lift the curse on the people who turned into monstrous beasts, he declared while lifting his palms up to the heavens. A gigantic black and blue smoke burst out of the people of the swamp who were cursed. Castilia grimaced to watch the people being purged of the darkness. She now stood over him. The legend raised her blade that was stained red from blood of her foes and looked down at the prince. May the elements judge you for the terrible crimes you have brought upon this land, she said, and as she began to bring down her blade. As Nero saw his fate, he laughed maliciously at her. You foolish girl, it will never end just because you kill me. That was the last words Nero ever spoke. Castilia the legend beheaded the tyrant prince that tried to rule all 4 territories. The ground began to shake all around them as Nero's lifeless body crumpled to the ground, never to rise again. The warriors from the darkness transformed into harmless ash and blew away. Excuse me. The cannibal gnomes turned into stone and burst apart until there was nothing but tiny pebbles. Just then, Rifa came out of the fortress. Oakland's daughter prepared her blowpipe as she saw Rifa just beginning to use black magic with her hands and use it towards Castilia's unprotected back. The dart flew straight and true. Rifa turned and at that very last second vanished into thin air. Then all was quiet. Jacob now recovered and slowly limped his way to his sister. He didn't say a word, but hugged her tightly. One of the surviving ungifted men raised his weapons and shouted out, "Victory is ours! Nero is vanquished!" A boisterous and jubilant cheer cut through the air. Castilia turned into her brother's shoulder and wept. She stepped away from her brother, tears in her eyes. Her older brother gave her a short nod and a small encouraging grin and understood her. Leon solemnly made his way to his female friend. He wrapped her in a hug as well. The battle had been won, but at a steep price. Many flyers, elves, legends, and ungifted men had been lost. Nero's men were killed. There could be no survivors from his kingdom. The soldiers set to work searching and finding the injured and tending to the wounded. Castilia and Leon were sifting through the war rubble when they both spied Riplin lying at an odd angle. He had a deep wounds around his torso. His leg had an ugly gash that was in need of medical attention. He held his hand up for the legend to hold. He coughed. You haven't forgotten about me, I hope." Leon's eyes filled with tears. He was about to get ready to move his injured friend, but Ripplin shook his head no. "Stay with me for a minute. Death will come claim you soon," Ripplin said in a calm voice. Leon was still as stone. His heart broke for his friend. "No, Ripplin, we can fix this. Hang on," Leon said with desperation in his voice. Ripplin raised an eyebrow. "Leon, even the best elven healers cannot put me together. I will miss you both terribly." His eyes clouded up, and he was gone. Castilia kissed the top of his hands. Castilia kissed the top of his hand she was holding and used her other hand to close his eyes. Leon put his head on his dead friend's chest and wept openly. Castilia's eyes were filled with tears. She silently let them fall down her face. Miggltura came up to them. The elven king looked tired and restless. He touched Leon softly on the back, and when Leon could face him, the king of the elves simply said, "Come." They followed him. The elf led the two companions to where Oakland was kneeling by a beautiful female elf with a wound to her chest by one of Nero's men. It was the same elf who had comforted Jacob. Castilia's brother was kneeling next to her and holding her hand in his, much the same way Castilia had held Ripplin's. Miggltura made eye contact with Leon. She wanted to see the hunter of the orbs before she moves on. Leon slowly approached and got down on his knees. He beheld her deep gray eyes. "Hello there. I'm here. Please don't leave us. I'm honored a battle-seasoned elf like yourself would want to speak with a nobody like me." She smiled weakly and sputtered out some Elvish that Leon could not understand. Then she too passed away. Jacob wailed and wept. It was Castilia who brought comfort to her older brother. Miggltura approached and put a strong hand on Jacob's shoulder. Leon then, seeing he was not needed, walked away and helped the other injured and wounded. He noticed that his brown chestnut horse was lying down by a dead splayed Lygon. He watched. His horse would get up, but it wouldn't travel far and return to the dead Lygon. Curiously, Castilia's horse came up and began doing the same action as his horse. Odd, Leon thought, as he walked over to investigate. As he drew near, he could hear the mournful distress calls of Little Boy. He was stuck and being crushed to death by the dead Lygon on top of him. "Help! Help! Someone come help me!" he frantically called out at the top of his lungs. The same man who had come to the aid of his allies and leader of the ungifted came dashing toward him with a few men and several elves. With teamwork, they were able to lift the dead creature off the adult water dweller. The large reptile scuttled over to the two horses. He made happy noises and gently snapped at them. The horses whinnied just as happily and tossed their heads and pranced about while nudging the water dweller in a playful manner. "Oh, sure, thank the horses first. We did nothing," Leon said teasingly. The others looked on and had small smiles on their faces. Leon wiped sweat, blood, and dirt from his forehead. As if Little Boy understood, he headed over to Leon. Little Boy, like the rest of them, had not come away unscathed. He had lost a toe on his front foot and back foot. He also had received deep lacerations trailing from his shoulder to the back of his leg. 1 of the men came up to Leon and said, I think the elves can tend to your pet." The hunter had a faint smile on his face and bobbed his head in agreement. To Leon, it seemed that the elves and even Miggltura had put aside their feelings and realized that without each other, victory would not have been possible. Both men and elves carried Little Boy to where healers were tending to the wounded. Castilia was assisting them. She had blood on both hands from helping to hold down the warrior who wriggled too much. Who was wriggling too much. She was currently stitching up a man's side back up when her eyes met Leon in tow with the others attending to Little Boy. They set the water dweller down slowly and gingerly. Miggltura came and examined the massive creature. "Leon, help me to keep him calm while I tend his wounds. Castilia, you too." Castilia finished her stitching job and came up to the others. The leader of the elves was very knowledgeable about cuts and the like. It didn't take him long to assess how and what needed to be done. He cleaned the wound like any other. Then he took some common healing herbs and crushed them into the wound. Little Boy gave a loud protest at this. Next, he stitched up the wound, which was the most difficult part due to the tough, thick skin the reptile had. And lastly, he used some fresh, clean wrapping and wrapped it around the belly of the gator. After, Little Boy was left to rest. Leon couldn't bear to see the wounded any longer. He strode away. Castilia trotted after him to follow, but Oakland, who himself was cut up quite a bit, put a hand on her shoulder. She raised her head to him with a question in her eyes. No, my friend. I think he needs to be alone right now." She let out a sigh, but nodded in silent understanding. Leon went far away from the battlefield and sat down. He saw his brother standing nearby. Trigger didn't say a word. "I did it. I completed the task the legends appointed me. Why then do I feel so empty, drained, and defeated?" he said, more to himself than to Trigger. Now, most of the other spirits had gone back to the heavens. Only a handful stayed behind. Trigger was one of them. Trigger floated near his younger brother. The older brother sat next to Leon. There was a brief, silent pause before Leon spoke again. His words were laced with bitter regret and loss. "You know, sometimes I wish I died in that battle, just so I wouldn't have to feel this awful grief and sorrow." Trigger, for the first time since Leon started this journey, glared daggers at his younger sibling. He gave his own opinion. "Do you assume that just because I am deceased I do not feel pain? I feel the same loss as you. I feel pain for the not being able to help when you needed it." Leon stared, open-mouthed a little. He said nothing. He had never considered how it must be to watch from the sidelines and being helpless to assist in any other. Leon didn't return to camp till dusk. That evening, he was very solemn. So that is all the chapter for today. Thank you so much for listening. If you are interested in purchasing this book for yourself to read along with me, or to give to a friend, family member, coworker, any of that, you can find my book on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, Apple iBooks, and lots of other places books are sold. I also have a Facebook page dedicated to all things Legends Orbs of the Elements. I write an article Monday through Friday about different aspects of my book, about characters, setting, how I created the world of the legends. I also write articles about my three baddies, Nero, Rifa, and Blinken. My books, the articles are always as spoiler-free as can be, so if you are enjoying this story but want to read about my writing process and all the different aspects of that. You guys will not be spoiled. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a big like, subscribe, share with friends and family. Down in the comments down below, let me know what you guys think of the battle. Was it what you were expecting? Yeah, I'd really love to know. And as they say in my book, may the elements protect you, and I will see you guys tomorrow for another chapter. Bye-bye for now, everybody.